Hello, and welcome to episode number 4 of the National Land Realty podcast, where we discuss all things land. Our goal here is to inform, educate, and entertain those of you who own land or are interested in the buying and selling of land throughout the United States. My name is Mac Christian, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty. I'll be your host for this episode. Today, our topic will be poultry farming, where we will learn about this industry and how the purchasing process works. National Land Realty land professional John Alumbaugh has 17 years of experience working specifically with poultry real estate in Mississippi. John grew up around agriculture and earned his master's degree from the Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. He is involved in the National Association of Realtors, the Mississippi Association of Realtors, Agricultural, Industrial, Commercial Real Estate, the Mississippi Poultry Association, and the Oak Forest Baptist Church. With almost 20 years of working exclusively with poultry farms, John is an unparalleled expert on the topic. He's put a lot of effort into writing on the topic of poultry farms, and you can read them on our blog at nationalland.com. Now, sit back and enjoy the show. So I'm sitting here today with John Alumbaugh. John he lives right outside of Jackson, Mississippi, and has been working in real estate for around 17 years. But that does not encompass all your experience, right, John? Tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get here?
Well, I grew up on a row crop farm in Arkansas. We farmed cotton, soybeans. We had a few livestock that we dealt with just outside the backyard. We had a few hogs and a cow or two and even a horse. And we had backyard chickens like a lot of people think about. And then I spent the first 26 years of my adult life in ministry. And that's where my master's degree from the Orleans Seminary comes in. And I directed music in Baptist churches full time for 26 years. And then I decided that I wanted to see how things were in the business world. I got into real estate, and not long after that, the chicken farm industry sort of piqued my interest, and nobody was working in that niche in Mississippi at that time. So I proceeded to immerse myself in that, and that's pretty well how I got to where I am now.
So there were no sort of like in-between steps. You went straight from ministry to just deciding to go into poultry, and that is where you stayed.
Well, poultry farm sales.
Okay, yeah, well, that's what I mean. Yes, it just on the real estate side though, but you just went straight to that.
Right. I still direct music in Baptist churches, but I do it because I love it now, and I don't worry too much about the money from that standpoint. I just help where I can. But the real estate has been how I've made my main income for the last 17 or so years.
That is interesting. It's interesting because usually you find people that go into a profession and they kind of like start out very broad, and before they kind of dial into a specific niche in any given market, and you just kind of like just had a calling in that one area, right?
I guess it happened, and I've sold quite a few farms over the years, and I keep up with the people that buy the farms. And one of the things that I pride myself on is I try to help folks into farms so that everybody can win. The seller can get a price that they're happy with. The buyer can get a price that with his bankers and everybody, he can figure out how to cash flow that business. And so far, most everybody that I've put in the chicken business over the last 17 years is still in. There's one or two exceptions, but most of them are either still in it or they have decided to retire or whatever. I try my best to make it to where everybody can win.
Yeah, in Mississippi is they're 10th in the country in poultry farms, which is something that I had to Google, before our meeting, and I did not realize that it was that large of an industry in Mississippi.
It is, and it's one of the larger agricultural type activities in Mississippi. For instance, I used to live in a town called Forest, Mississippi, which is about 50 miles from where I live now. And there was a point that they were processing 4 million birds per week in the city limits of Forest, Mississippi.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Please tell me that Forest, Mississippi was a place that had very few trees.
No, lots of trees, but it has some pasture land, and the chicken farms. It's a big industry for us here in Mississippi.
Yeah. So and I just want to clarify to anybody listening, because I always kind of, and I repeat it a lot, is like I come at from when I talk to any of the agents that we talk with, just because of your expertise, I intentionally go in as ignorant as possible to try to get you to bring me up to speed, and therefore bring any kind of listeners up to speed. So when we're talking a poultry farm, we're not talking a coop in the backyard with 8 chickens where you go out there and you have eggs and you can make an omelet in the morning and maybe give some to your friends because you have too many eggs. We're talking a larger scale than that, right?
Oh, yes, much larger. Thousands of birds in one house. And a breeder farm typically will have 2 houses with 10,000 hens or more if the specs are changing now where they're building bigger houses. And usually there's 2 of those buildings in a typical breeder farm. I have seen as many as 6, but that's a huge operation for a local farmer. And they gather those eggs, and out of each house in peak production, they'll be bringing in as many as 7,500 eggs per day out of each house.
And so when we're talking eggs, this is not like for 1 million omelets, right? This is to breed other chickens for the purpose of broiler chickens.
The breeder farmer gathers fertile eggs, which are then transported to the integrator's hatchery, and they inoculate them. They hatch them out, and then they take them to broiler farms to be raised for your dinner table.
Right.
But we're not talking about breakfast eggs. Most of those houses are owned by a corporate producer, and we call them breaker houses. I've never had much to do with that. But the breeder houses are for fertile eggs to produce chickens that then go to the farm and are raised out for slaughter.
So in a breeder house, this is where, again, you're rearing the eggs that go on to become your dinner. So in the breeder house, how much emphasis is put on a specific breed of chicken, as opposed to, is there like a standardized breed that you're usually just raising up for meat, or what's sort of the breeding that goes behind that? Well,
the integrators, i.e. Sanderson Farms, Tyson, there's several, they actually provide you with the chickens to produce the eggs.
So they've already taken care of that side of it.
That's right. And they will pay so much per dozen for you to produce and put those eggs in a cart that a truck comes along about twice a week and picks it up and takes it to the hatchery.
Gotcha.
Listen, they've got it all down to a science.
Oh yeah. It's very much I think it's probably because of the lifespan of the chicken. You can pull a large case study out of just probably a couple years, because there's so many chickens, and the lifespan, like, when you're talking about it goes from egg, and then they're only in the broiler farm. Are we farm? I want to make sure I use the right term. So it's only in a broiler farm for, you said 39 to maybe 62 days?
36 to 60 or so.
36 to 60. Yeah. So I mean, they rotate.
It depends on where the integrator is and how many they need. Sometimes they'll pull chickens early from a farm. Sometimes they'll let them go another week. But they run everything on a tight schedule to be able to produce and take care of their customers. And their customers are like Chick-fil-A and McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken and Popeyes and all that. They many times are producing birds that meet the specs of that particular company. How many will fit in a fryer? and that kind of thing.
You got to make sure that you don't overload the fryer. I get it.
I guess I don't know. But.
So let's walk through. It can sound daunting, right? When you're talking about any given, chicken house is taking up 10,000 chickens. You said 10,000 hens. So in that situation, and I referred intentionally to the backyard, egg raising, as opposed to this when somebody's hearing about a poultry farm. And it sounds daunting, but you do get people that come into the poultry industry that have never had anything to do with any kind of poultry before, right?
I have sold farms to people who are changing career, changing the way they wanted to live, and sort of become their own boss.
And how what's that look like? So if you decide to go into poultry, I'm going to go into poultry tomorrow, and I'm going to buy, let's say a broiler farm. Going into it, what would you tell me as far as what's the work like?
Well, on a broiler farm, you basically get your houses ready to the specs of the integrator, i.e. Sanderson, Tyson, Cook Foods, whoever. And then they bring the baby chicks. And when the baby chicks come, they only take up about a third of the space in that broiler house. So they have a little fence that they put halfway or wherever they want, what they call the brood end. And they have the feed in lids, trays, basically. And they'll have on the feed lines, they'll have what they call chick mates, which is a tube they can turn and aim it at that lid, and it brings out the food for the baby chicks. And so for the first couple of weeks, you're monitoring that, and as they grow, you take up some feed lids until you get to the point that you open that fence up, let them have the entire house. And then they eat out of the automated feeders. So you don't have to do that anymore. And so the first couple of weeks that you have new baby chickens, you're going to spend a lot of time out there in that chicken house and dealing with issues on the farm. As they get bigger, then you go through in the morning, the farmer will go through in the morning and check his equipment, make sure everything's working right. He will pick up dead chickens. You're going to have some mortality. Usually it's not a great deal, but there are a few dead chickens every day. You pick those up, make sure everything's running, fix anything that's wrong, and then you've got time that you can do other things that you want to do or that you need to do for your farm outside of the chicken house.
Gotcha. So, and you're feeding, is it scratch that you're feeding them, or is there a specialized feed?
The company also produces your feed and brings it to you in an 18-wheeler, and they load it into your feed bins, and then your automated system takes that feed out of those feed bins as it's needed and runs it all through that house on a conveyor-like feeder line, and they've got it all timed out. They know when those birds are going to eat. They know how much they need to eat, and they feed them accordingly.
So, and it's probably the same for the broiler farms, correct? Just to keep
yes, but that is particularly yes. That's now the breeder farms. They're going to keep that flock of hens and a few roosters for a year, and then it's time for the house to be cleaned out, and the chickens are caught, they're taken and processed. I'm told that those chickens that get to live to be the oldest are the ones that you find in chicken pot pies and anything that's boiled or that kind of thing. That's what I'm told. I haven't seen the process start to finish, but after they live a while, they get a little tough, so they have to be tenderized and boiled and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, I was going to process that.
The farmer goes ahead and he cleans out all of the litter and the refuse from the farm, washes everything down, gets everything set back up. And the next thing you know, here we come with some more hens that are ready. And for the first month or so that you have those hens, you'll get what they call pullet pay. And that means that they're basically paying you to feed that bird with their feed. But and then after they begin to produce the fertile eggs, that's when you get paid by the dozen.
Okay. How
I'm not gambling too much, but anyway.
I was going to say, how does one even in the first place go out and say, you know what, I'm gonna start a poultry farm? Like, you obviously have to get in contact with one of the companies that right. will do this. How does one do that in the first place?
Well, basically, if you want to buy an existing farm,
there's probably an agreement in place, I'm guessing.
Yeah, if you want to buy an existing farm, you find the farm that you're interested in that's for sale. And then once you decide that you like that farm, you go to the integrator and ask them for a contract to grow birds in that farm. And then they will go out and make a list of updates and repairs that they want done to that farm. And they will tell you, if they're interested in working with you, they will tell you, okay, we'll give you a contract to grow birds after you do this, this, and this to the farm. Then we will bring you birds. So you have to get a contract from the producer, and financing is a major chore in buying one of these. Most of these are going to be $1 million plus deals, and sometimes multi-million-dollar deals. So there are banks that specialize in poultry farm lending. You can't make a monthly payment on a poultry farm. You need to pay your loan whenever your chickens are gathered, or when your eggs are gathered, whichever one you're doing. And so
they time it with the cash flow. Then when they're specializing in poultry, they time it with when they know that poultry farms get their cash flow.
Right.
That's interesting. Okay.
So the banks set that up on a per flock note. Whenever you get these farmers say selling chickens, they are actually the company's chickens already. The company pays them to take care of them and put weight on them. And once they get to the point that they want it, cash. I'm trying to come back around. Cash flow is the biggest concern that the farmer has. The integrator is concerned about the welfare of those chickens. I guess everybody's concerned with the welfare of the chickens, but the banks will set this up to where you make a payment when you sell a flock back to the integrator. And in most cases, the bank has an agreement with the integrator and the farmer that the integrator will actually send the payment in for the farmer, and then the farmer gets what's left of the check.
Okay.
So, and then he has to pay his electric bill and his gas bill and all that kind of stuff out of that.
So a lot of what the poultry industry has converted to, like, you're not even necessarily chicken farming. You're kind of like a chicken nanny in a lot of cases. You kind of like to watch other people's kids.
I don't know about that. Some farmers might find that a bit.
I would never say that out loud.
But, I mean, that farmer has a lot of responsibility.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I don't mean to undercut it by saying nanny. I'd get something thrown at me, but I mean, like, really, like, so, like, you're not like raising, you're not finding chickens. You form an agreement where they send you the chickens that you raise, and you kind of by policy raise those and get them ready for consumption and ship them out. I just never realized that the poultry industry even worked like that. Just mostly because my family came from a cattle background, and so, like, I saw things from that side. I don't have to fake the ignorance with poultry. I'm completely ignorant. Like,
and I'm probably not doing a great job of explaining it. I tend to.
No, it's a fascinating job. I'm absolutely fascinated by this. So this is very cool. So and then tell me about, like, we've talked about how you get a contract, what you look for, how large a chicken house is. A lot of these properties are pre-existing that you work with in particular. And I don't even think I want to go into the details. If I wanted to buy, open land and build one of these things, all the specs that have to go into it, because I'm assuming you have to fit that to a given corporation that has chickens. But let's talk about a little bit about just the work during the day. You talked about, most of the work goes into when you get young chicks in a broiler farm, having to watch and make sure that they get old enough to kind of be self-sufficient. But what about the day-to-day maintenance? Like how much shoveling do you do in a given day? Like how much chicken poop do you have on the ground at the end of any given day?
Well, they don't do that. They don't do that the way you probably envisioned. The litter remains in the houses with the chickens until the chickens are gone, and the farmer brings in a machine called a housekeeper. And basically he breaks up what they call the cake, takes the top layer of it out to another building, a litter shed, and many times they sell that to local farmers to put on their pasture land, or, it's great fertilizer. It'll just about make grass grow on pavement. But that's what they do with that. And then in the process, the ground inside the chicken houses gets pulverized and ready for a new flock. And they take the cake. Basically, the cake is the top layer where those birds have been. They take
Worst
it out,
cake ever, right?
in the dirt, or the shavings, whatever, and then they bring in another flock and repeat the process. They clean those houses out to the ground every few years. Every once in a while, and the company helps monitor that. If it gets to be time that they feel like that stuff all needs to go, then they'll ask you to clean out to the ground. And usually somebody comes in with dozer or other equipment and pulls that stuff out, puts it on 18-wheelers and takes it. Some of it here goes up into the Mississippi Delta and goes on cotton fields. Believe that or not.
That's fascinating. So really there's a self-sustaining cycle there. Like you have food coming in, and when I asked the question about, cleaning up on a daily basis, I guess I wasn't thinking about how short of a duration the chicken is actually in there. When you're talking 30 to 60 days, like they're out in 2 months and you clean it and then you have a new flock.
Right.
And so the chickens that you raise get shipped off, and then, that becomes everybody's dinner. And then everything down to the poop is pulled up and then given out as fertilizer. Like There's not a whole lot of, and I pictured sort of like, again, going back to my experience, like with cattle and stuff, when you look at a dairy, the waste from a dairy piles up, and it gets like some goes to manure and everything, but you get a lot of waste, but it's not necessarily a ton because a chicken's not a very big one. And then they're using that for fertilizer locally. It's really interesting that it's that much of a almost kind of a self-sustaining enterprise.
I don't know how much litter, as we call it, a chicken produces in its short lifetime, but when you've got 25 or 28,000 chickens in the same house, that's a good bit of it.
It's probably a bit, huh?
Grower farm, you'll have and many more chickens than you do in a breeder farm. You'll have 20,000, 25, 28,000, depending on the size bird you're raising, size house you have, and what the integrator wants.
I got you. And so when you're thinking about, the industry in your area, is there a lot of kind of families that get into this? Is this usually a family operation? Is this usually a business enterprise where like you have sort of a co-op or several investors in this, or how does that usually work?
Well, the companies, the integrators don't particularly. I have this question that comes to me weekly almost from somebody that says, hey, I'll invest in one of those and hire a manager. Well, the companies don't like that because nobody will take care of your farm the way you will, no matter how much you pay them. And so they like for the farmer to live on the farm with his family And that way he's there. Anytime something comes up, he's there. He has an alarm system in this house. There are sensor. Can you still hear me?
Yeah. That was just my calendar went off. I apologize for that.
They have computers and sensors all through this house. And they have a communicator that will call them. That the house will actually call, the computer in the house will actually call the farmer and say there's a problem in sector 6 or there's a problem over here. And the farmer then sometimes at 3:00 in the morning has to get up and go down there and see about that and make sure that, all those birds are getting their feed, because that's extremely important, that they get fed all the time on a regular schedule. You don't want to stress that bird in any way. You want him to sit there, eat, be happy, poop, and get fat. That's what you want.
Which is,
but I'm sorry, Matt. Let me.
Go ahead.
The family farm is what we're talking about here in most of the cases. Investors and hiring managers just really don't work for the reasons I just said. But most of the time, for instance, you take a farmer that has a 6-house broiler farm. He's got a full-time job in that broiler farm. His wife or her husband or whoever, I'm talking, we have women that farm these chicken farms, but the other spouse usually has some kind of outside work. For instance, if your wife is a teacher, then you have a steady income there that is there for you all the time, and in most of those jobs you get health insurance, and that's a big deal for folks that are self-employed.
Right.
So now there are some farms out there that husband and wife work together. Those are larger farms even than what I'm talking about.
What size would that be? Because you just said 10 houses would support one spouse would work in that, and then the other would have a job. So you're talking. That's in the range, according to what you said, around 60,000, 70,000 chickens in those situations, because you said around 10,000 per house. So we're getting mixed up on different things. All right.
Very specific. The breeder farms, the ones that I've dealt with, had 10,000 hens and 1,000 roosters for each house.
Okay, so that's okay.
And now that is a full-time job because you're gathering eggs every day, and those birds lay eggs on Christmas Day and on the 4th of July and Thanksgiving. They don't know any different. They're going to lay eggs every day, and you're what they call running the belts. The eggs come down on a conveyor belt. You bring them out to you. You may clean them up a little bit, put them in a tray and put them in a cooler, and they sit there until the company comes in a day or two and gets them. That's pretty labor intensive. The broiler farms, on the other hand, you can go walk your houses, pick up your dead, take care of any maintenance issues, and then you can have a little bit of time to go to the coffee shop if you want to.
I got you.
Visit with other farmers and that kind of thing. So as far as how many houses, most of the time, a 6-house farm is where you can make a full-time living. There are farms that are larger than that, but in the case you just asked about, I usually say that there's 6 houses that Mr. Farmer farms, and then Mrs. Farmer teaches school or is a nurse or whatever she does to make her portion of the money for the family.
Gotcha. Or vice versa with
right.
The husband working over. Yeah. So in a broiler farm, how many chickens are in a house in a broiler farm?
Well, it depends on the size of the house.
I get, yeah.
The size bird that the integrator wants. I've seen some, most of the time they're shooting for anywhere from a 4-pound bird up to an 8 or 10-pound bird. Not many 10-pound ones out there, but because you're getting into the size of a turkey at that point.
I was gonna say that's a monster chicken.
Yeah. And one of the things I've seen, and I learned something new every time I talk to a farmer. I mean, I've been doing this many years, but that's part of what I love about what I do. I get to go out and visit with these guys that have this kind of experience, and I learned something new just about every time. But the birds, once they get to a certain weight, if they get, way on up there around the 10-pound range, especially in the heat of the summer, they'll have heart attacks, and you don't want that. You want to try to take care of them and get them out of there before they get so big that they can't sustain themselves.
Right. And that kind of brings me to a question that's been brewing on my head. And it's really, part of this is a statement, I guess, too, because I feel like the chicken industry is one of those poultry industry, is one of those areas in agriculture that sort of gets demonized a little bit when you look at sort of like animal rights and stuff like that. And I think it's because you're working with high quantities, because the U.S. eats a ton of chicken. And plus it's kind of combined with the lifespan. They're just not there very long. And sort of what you've said so far is sort of dispelled some of that. Like, it's not this corporate enterprise that is just churning out meat. Like, these are usually family run operations, and they're very much concentrated on the health of the chicken, because that's what the integrator needs and wants and requires, right?
They baby those chickens as much as possible. It's not a cruel thing as far as raising the chicken. They're in a house safe from all the roving animals, the foxes and the hounds and bobcats, weasels, skunks, whatever. They're inside a house. They're safe. They don't have to worry about any of that kind of thing. They eat and they drink, and that's it.
And another thing that I found sort of interesting, and I was hoping to bring that up with you, is the word is thrown around a lot, like GMO chickens, like genetically modified chickens. And in going through, like, it's not a thing. I didn't realize it wasn't a thing. I just always heard the phrasing, right? And what they're talking about is the fact that there's selective breeding, that like you rear chickens that have large, breast meat or things. And so it's more of just breeding, that they've been able to do that, right? They're not going in and, DNA splicing chickens.
I am not aware of anything like that happening. If that were the case, I wouldn't do what I do.
Right.
But the companies that I'm familiar with around here, they are interested in the health and welfare of the chickens, and they want it to be good meat when it goes to the table. So this is done in a very humane way. Yes.
Let's talk about, I wanted to ask you too, and then there's I have a lot of curiosities about the industry. Yeah. So when people say free range chicken, what's it mean?
Well, the only thing I know of is that it's got plenty of room to roam and not in a crowded or a caged atmosphere. Okay. These chickens are not living in cages. They're living in huge barn enclosures that we call chicken houses. Right. They do have some room to roam.
So, and when they say room to roam, usually, like, a lot of times, like, they're in the coop or cage or living area, and like they can turn around and they have room to walk a little bit, right? But they're only in there for 30 days or 60 days or.
Well, they have a little more room than that. There are no cages inside those chicken houses.
Oh, okay. So it's all
open house.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I had a different picture in my head, but that's why I get to ask these goofy questions. Yeah. Then I get to, and then there's a differentiation between free range and open range, right? Open range is like they get outside and like.
I guess I don't know much about that.
Okay. It's just probably not an industry thing. It's just put on. There's so many labels that you see. They cut, people greenwash their labels and try to make themselves look at, they put different things on there for branding, and you don't know what they mean.
Well, I assure you that that this is all done, like I said, in a very humane way. I don't know of anybody in breeders or broilers or pullet houses. I don't know of anybody that puts them in individual cages and they only have room to turn around. They're able to wander throughout this house and interact, I guess, as much as they interact with each other. I don't know nothing about chickens talking back and forth to each other. I have some clients that I've kept up with over the years that actually talk to their hens.
Yeah, yeah.
It makes them produce better.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's like I'm sure, with being that a lot of these operations are family run, that a lot of times you have a husband and wife working, the poultry farm on some level. I mean, the chickens are not there very long, but I'm sure that there's a fairly strong affection that they get for the birds or for the crop that they have. Like they probably, there's probably an attachment there. And I don't mean like that you're attached to the bird itself, but like just to the animal itself.
That's your bread and butter.
Yeah.
As a farmer. And so you want to take care of those chickens, and the chickens will take care of you on payday.
Right. Right. So, and you mentioned that the financing is very different for the banks. What specific banks work with this?
Well, we have
Lenders,
land banks in most areas of the state will lend money on chicken farms. There is a bank that's headquartered out of El Dorado, Arkansas, that's called First Financial. At one point, they made the majority of the loans for chicken farms in the state of Mississippi. They had an office over here in Carthage, and there's another one or two around somewhere in the state. But some other banks do this. Bank Plus here does it. The main thing is they have to have a poultry division that's set up to be able to loan specifically in the poultry industry, because the payment doesn't come in monthly. It's kind of like my dad was a cotton farmer, and all of his payments came due in the fall.
So it was timed out with that too.
Yeah. So and when you have a flock of chickens leave your farm and go to the integrator, they weigh them and grade them and so forth, and they write you a check based on weight and quality and some other expenses that they take care of. But that's how you get your money. So the chickens are very important to that farmer, just like a cattle farmer loves his cows. A horse farmer loves his horses. A tree farmer loves his trees. I had never seen one hug, but anyway.
Yeah, your timber investors, they're definitely all about the trees.
Right.
Which is, and I bring that up because, anybody listening to this that is already affiliated with agriculture already understands these things.
Right.
Any given animal that somebody works with, they form an affection for, and it's kind of like hunters have a strong affection for game. And it kind of, people don't picture that, I guess, from the outside. And I want to explain this to anybody listening from the outside, that like when people are working with in a given industry in agriculture, there's a strong affection that they have for the animals they work with, and their well-being is always, it's not like anybody out there that goes out there and celebrates, the bad conditions of any given animal and just, reaps the money. Like, these people love what they're doing and are raising this.
They do love it. And they enjoy the chickens, as far as they go out and get among them every day. They walk those houses, and they're basically kind of like, the old biblical thing about a shepherd. The shepherd loves his flock. So they only get to keep them for a little while, and I don't know about anybody getting emotionally attached to them, but it's a means to an end. And you got to take care of them if they're going to take care of you.
Right. That's fascinating. So, how many, you've been in this for 17 years. How many poultry farms have you worked with, sold, helped buyers find?
Oh, goodness. I don't know. I don't know of a number that I can put on that. If the sales, like I said, are usually $1 million plus sales. And so I don't have to sell many of them in order to make a good living. But I can't answer that question. I don't know how many I've sold.
So when you first decided to go into this, into the, working with poultry real estate, did you go in with experience in poultry? Like you mentioned, you grew up,
No,
in agriculture, but you didn't mention chickens anywhere in there. So
we only had some chickens in the backyard for eggs. But I got into it basically because I did have a farm background, and I'm comfortable talking to a farmer. And most of them, I think, are pretty comfortable talking to me. And I respect their farms. I don't go from one chicken farm to another without changing my shoes or sanitizing my shoes somehow or another. Usually I spray them down really good with a disinfectant because, we have to be conscious of cross contamination on these farms. So a lot of times if I got a customer that wants to see multiple farms, I'll either do those kind of things, or I buy these plastic boots that the service techs use and put those over my feet while we're on some of these farms. And I do that, and I respect these companies and their efforts to keep the chickens healthy. So that's just one of those things that we do. We make sure, and that's unique to a livestock type farm. Chickens are livestock. They're, they live and they breathe and they can get sick. And if, at times the biosecurity on these farms, if the bird flu's in the air, or some other virus or cold-like symptoms are in the air, you don't want to take that from one farm to another. So
yeah,
sometimes you don't know it's there.
Right. Well, I was going to say something like that. Like you're talking about someone's entire livelihood when right. Something like that comes along. That becomes a very, very dangerous thing.
That's right.
What was the learning curve like starting out in this industry? Like, how many mistakes did you make out of the gate?
Well, I don't know. I learned, as I told you a while ago, I learned something every time I talk to a farmer. And a farmer talking about them loving their chickens and their livestock, farmer loves to talk to you about his farm. And as long as he doesn't think you're nosy and going to go blab stuff to everybody under the sun, he'll talk to you all day about his farm. And I love that because they all have a unique perspective.
Yeah. Well, really, I think that it probably means that you didn't make very many big mistakes, because I think if you had, you would have heard about it.
Well, I've never been called down. I'll put it that way. I've never been called on the carpet by one of the companies yet.
Yeah, I can't imagine with your experience that that's going to happen anytime soon.
Well, I hope not.
So, I want to, I appreciate your time here today. I want to be able to let you get back out to work and do your thing. But tell me, how would somebody if somebody wanted to work with you, wanted to get into poultry in the Mississippi area, how are they going to reach out to you, and who do you work with?
I work with National Land Realty, that same company that's on the logos on your hat.
I meant like your perfect customer. Sorry.
Oh, my perfect customer. Well, I don't know that there is a perfect customer or a client, but they find me on the internet. Everybody goes to the internet for everything these days. And usually the next thing is a phone call and sort of feel out the situation. And the next thing is, are you interested enough to go look at some farms? There are some things that I try to pre-qualify people with. The banks want to know that you have something that you can put into the farm. They want a substantial down payment, or they want some security interest in other real estate that you may own or that your family owns. And then they go from there and go through the process. It usually takes about 3 months. I don't think I've ever closed a farm deal in less than 3 months.
So it takes the time to get it all geared up and get all the paperwork.
And get the guarantees in place. Most of these loans are backed by a government guarantee through the Farm Service Agency or the Small Business Administration. And anytime you're dealing with the government, it takes time.
There's always the red tape there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a neat topic. I mean, honestly, I would love to do some more deep dives into some more specific areas. I think this was a great sort of overhead on, what the poultry industry is in Mississippi, how some people get into it, those kind of things. I would love to talk more on sort of like even like the financial side, taxation, or actual logistics or problems that arise. But man, I just appreciate your time. This was absolutely fascinating. And you have a wealth of knowledge on the topic. It's very rare to meet somebody who has a niche this specific. So I find the whole thing fascinating, man. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Glad to do it.
I thank you very much, and I'll let you carry on with your day.
All right. Thank you. Good to talk to you.
This concludes episode number 4 of the National Land Realty podcast, discussing poultry farms with one of our land professionals, John Alumbaugh, just outside of Jackson, Mississippi. You can learn more about land ownership or the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com.